It's time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome back. 365 Sports, Paul Catalina and Garrett Ross giving you this very special Top 5 today. And Garrett, I thought we would, since I've talked so much about recruiting in the transfer portal, as we're going into the holidays, I think we need to talk about the CFP games and some of those issues. So today we'll talk about Michigan and Bama, and tomorrow we'll talk about Texas and Washington. And I'm at a point, mental health-wise, where I can discuss this without flying into a rage.
It sounds like you're barely there, though.
I mean, I'm over the finish line. I'm not completely I'm still maybe taunting people and yelling.
Rightfully so.
But I'm at a point where I've accepted it. I've moved mostly on, and we can talk about these games. It didn't help that I just read an article about Florida State and their future and how this all came to be. But here we go. Number 5, can Jim Harbaugh get over the hump? He has gotten them to this point, but last year got upset by TCU. Everyone was shocked by that.
Right.
I wasn't so much. I really wasn't. I wasn't shocked by anything that happened in last year's 2 CFP games. I wasn't shocked that TCU beat Michigan. I was shocked that they controlled the game for as long as they did. But I was not shocked that they won that game because I do think that the Big Ten sometimes does not have, throughout their schedule, the kind of speed and athleticism, we'll talk about that in a second, that some of the other leagues do, and that includes the Big 12. And they're not used to that, and they're not used to seeing those things, especially when you get some of the schedules that they've had. That will change in the modern Big Ten. But can Jim Harbaugh go toe-to-toe with an SEC foe, with a classic dynastic team in Alabama, and maybe not even Alabama's best playoff team?
Oh, it's not their best.
But go toe-to-toe with these SEC athletes and outmuscle them. That's going to be the question.
I'm going to say no, he can't. I'm not necessarily saying he can't for the future, but in this instance, no, he can't. I think that while Michigan is a really good team, I think their deficiencies at the skill player positions, mainly on defense in their secondary, is something that's going to be exposed by Alabama. I think in the trenches, they can hang for the most part. But at the end of the day, once it gets into the fourth quarter, about that mid-second half of that fourth quarter, I think you see Alabama kind of start leaning on them. They have the pieces in place. They have the skill set, like your running back, obviously with Corum and J.J. McCarthy. They have the offensive. But I think on the defensive side, particularly that secondary, I think that's going to be what kind of hinders them in this game and why I don't think Harbaugh gets over the hill this year.
Yeah. Number 4, is Michigan healthy enough along the offensive line? They had problems late in the year with the offensive line, which was a strength of their team, and lost Zach Zinter at the end of the year, too, who is one of their best offensive linemen and a guy who's going to be an NFL player this year, but he's out. I mean, they're not going to have Zach Zinter for this game. Alabama is still good on defense. They're not classic Alabama, overwhelming on defense, but they're still really good and really efficient on that side of the ball, outside of the penalties for the most part. Another thing that we will talk about in a second. But is Michigan healthy enough on the offensive line to do what they've done? J.J. McCarthy threw 1 touchdown pass in the last 4 games because he didn't have to do any of that. But he's going to have to throw the ball more. They're going to have to protect him more. They cannot just expect to win this game with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. They're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to protect the quarterback. Can they do it with, Dallas Turner and those guys coming at you all night long?
I mean, I would love to say yes, because when you look at Michigan, I believe they won the Joe Moore Award last year for the best offensive line in the nation. They're always in the mix, right? So when they see it, when you look at Michigan, in my eyes, and they have an offensive lineman go down, I feel confident that they can have somebody step in and kind of fill that void. While there's going to be a step back, I think they can handle that situation better than most teams. But that being said, looking at how Alabama handled up and matched Georgia in the trenches in the SEC championship game, I think it's going to be more difficult than expected this time out in this matchup.
Yeah. All right. Now, I know that these have been mostly Michigan questions, and I do have a couple of Bama ones here. One, can Michigan contain Milroe on the run? And can Bama get him out on the run, not only called plays, but how many improvised plays can they have? Because where I think Jalen Milroe has gotten people is not necessarily on their called quarterback runs, which those can work out great for them. I mean, you saw in the LSU game, they had 2 like straight up called Milroe runs that wound up in touchdowns. Those were like straight up. But they also got a couple first downs in that game that were, I'm just going to run.
Yeah.
And that's where he gets you. Like, that's how he got Auburn. Like that, those are the things, can you get the best improviser at quarterback in the country right now? Because look, Michael Penix is great, and Quinn Ewers is really good, and he's on his way up, and JJ McCarthy's a really steady dude. But in these playoffs, the only person I think that if he would have been healthy that improvises like Jalen Milroe, honestly, of any of the playoff eligible teams, or maybe it's 2, is Bo Nix and Jordan Travis. And, of course, Jordan Travis is hurt, and that's why they're not in the playoff. And then, that and other reasons. But Bo Nix, those are the improvisational guys. Quinn Ewers is not an improviser.
No, not at all.
He's really skilled. Michael Penix may be a little bit more, but, again, those guys are more classic quarterback types. And Jalen Milroe is he's jazz, baby. It's the notes you don't hear from Jalen Milroe, right? That make him really good. So can Bama get him out on that? And if they do, can Michigan, after a couple times, figure out how to defend it and how to make sure that you have some, like on those 3rd and longs that he just runs and picks up, do you have somebody out there that's going to spy on him and make sure that he is just take off and run? Because there are routes that Jalen Milroe just does not throw well. So those almost you don't have to worry about. Yeah, I'd more worry about, I want one of these linebackers to be right here or a safety up in the box that can come and get him.
I think that's one. I think that's really going to be the difference in this game, because I don't think Michigan is able to compete and hang with Jalen Milroe doing that. I think that's what's kind of been the difference in Alabama of getting to where they are right now, is just kind of cutting him loose, letting him improvise and play his own ball. That's what makes them really unique. I'm concerned that Michigan's not going to be able to do that. You bring up a good point. Like, his throwing is inconsistent. That's what makes him special. But given this circumstance, I don't know that Michigan can contain him.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, number 2, can Bama be less sloppy? This is why people talk about them not being the classic Bama team, because they are kind of a wreck at times. They are a hot mess. If whatever they are, it's worked out for them. They found a way through it in every game but Texas. But they commit way more penalties than most Saban teams do. They do way more, just dumb stuff that is not indicative of a Saban team. A lot of that has to do with inexperience. But at this point in the year, this is going to be their 14th game. It shouldn't be that way, and it probably will be. And I think that's what's going to keep Michigan tight in this game. And that's what keeps most teams tight with Bama, is that they don't roll along well enough without committing a mistake that's a drive killer.
Yeah.
A false, 2 false starts on a drive. I think false starts are worse than holding penalties. You get a holding penalty, it sucks, but
I mean, there's holding on every play, so I would agree with that.
But if you get a false starts are drive killers.
Yeah.
It just, it takes your 3rd and 2 to a 3rd and 7. You've got to now adjust on the fly. If you're playing a good defense like Michigan, you've now just played into their hands, if Bama loses this game, I can almost promise you right now, what happened is that they could not get out of their own way.
I would agree with that, and I don't think that there's any way they could tighten it up. I think that you try to put a point of emphasis on it during this extended period before that you have practicing. But at this point in the season, man, this is who you are, right?
Yeah.
There's no way if it could have been fixed. And by this point in the season, Saban would have fixed it. Mm-hmm. I think you just they're lucky enough to be one of the very few programs in the nation whose athleticism can overcome the mistakes. And they're going to have to bank on that happening again against the Wolverines.
Yeah, they are. And number 1, can Michigan handle the SEC athleticism that they're going to see. They have only seen this once, kind of, this year when they played against Ohio State.
Correct.
And Ohio State pushed them to the brink. So when you are faced, and look, maybe twice, Penn State, that game was not a blowout. Like, that was just a dominant defensive performance.
And they just ran the ball all over Penn State. They didn't even have to throw against them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they didn't have to, like, but those are the two teams that had, like, if some of their guys went in the portal, SEC teams would call, right?
Yes.
Those are the two teams that would be the case. Like, if the whole Ohio State roster and the whole Penn State roster decided tomorrow, screw it, we're leaving, and they got in the portal, believe me, Bama and Georgia would be called.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So those are the teams that would do that, and those are the two teams that pushed Michigan the most this year. And Michigan's defense is excellent. It is absolutely excellent. There's no denying that, but they have not had to see this at all. And they've not had to see, like, Jermaine Burton is not even the 10th best Alabama wide receiver that has been in the last 4 years.
No, not even close.
But he's the second best receiver they would have seen this year.
No, go ahead.
And that's not to mention Bond. Like, that dude is just,
he's a
like,
freak.
Yeah, and Bond is the dude that he's the one who, when it all breaks down with Milroe, that Bond's the one who, like,
He's gonna find a hole.
They have this, like, mind meld where it's like, all right, like, I'll find you. You know, he was the one in Auburn. You know, I've heard Brad Nessler go, Isaiah Bond, like 8 times this year. You know, and those are the things, and I wonder if Michigan can handle that. I think that they're better set up to than they were in the past, but they have not seen it, and they have not seen it to the level that Alabama is going to bring it to them, especially since the quarterback position is going to be part of that athleticism, which they did not see in Kyle McCord or Drew Aller early this year. Jalen Milroe does things, like we talked about just a second ago, that those other guys just don't do.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what this is going to come down to. I don't think Michigan can match Bama's athleticism. I think if you bring up a good point, because, like, we played Marvin Harrison, but I don't even think Emeka Ekeba played in that game. So you haven't seen, like, multiple receivers on the field. Talia Tagovailoa has been the closest quarterback that you can draw up that you've seen compared to Jalen Milroe, and that's not even close.
No.
Not even remotely close. And I also think that that's kind of what they ran into last year when they faced TCU. TCU was freaking loaded, like, at the skill positions, and that's something that Michigan wasn't expecting. I think they are going. They probably realized that, and they're going to continue to try to get the playmakers in through the recruiting and the transfer portal. But at this moment, I don't see them being able to compete with Bama.
No. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Top 5. We're back again tomorrow with another one. This is 365 Sports.